So we made it to day 16. Today is actually going to start out with a little bit of suspension work again. I actually flat forgot about the sway bar. So I had it packed away in the box and the box put away, and I forgot that I had not put the sway bar on. So it's pretty easy to install. It actually indexes off of these rivets right here. So you drill those out and bolt in the bracket there. Since this truck didn't ever have a sway bar, you just drill into those. You pop a couple holes, one here, one on the other side. Then it also has some tabs that mount on the front side of the control arm here. The stock mounts up on top. There's some holes up here, right here. So these mount down here on the front face. So pop a couple holes on each side of the control arm, get that going. I got the fitting, the proper fitting to go from a 3/16 line with a 7/16 fitting back to a -3. The adapter that came from Willwood was actually a -3 to a 5/16, which is the appropriate fitting for a 3/16 line, but for some reason GM has these as a 7/16 fitting, so I actually ended up buying this one from Inline too. It's actually set up for the larger 1/4-inch line, but the reverse cone is actually long enough to interface with the flare on the 3/16 line. So, and then I've kind of been piddling around with the emergency brake lines here. I got to figure out what we want to do with those. I just kind of got them laid in here to kind of get an idea of how this is all going to work. I like this to interface with the stock e-brake cable. I was actually thinking about using that the stock cable that goes all the way back here to this here, but I don't know what we're going to do yet, so I've got to figure that out. All the new fittings came in, the unions and the T's. I'm going to put all those in there. Flare the lines back here so we can have those plumbed in, make this little one right here, and work on the lines up there at the master cylinder and get them squared away. So we got quite a bit to do today, but first off, I'm going to start off with working on this sway bar and get that installed. Okay, the brackets are onto the frame here. I went ahead and drilled out the rivets on both sides. As it turns out, I had a hole here in the frame, and not seen one of these before, and this truck did not have a factory sway bar. I don't know if this hole is where the factory bracket mounts. I'm assuming it does, but that hole was there. So the instructions said to drill a hole, but there was actually already a hole there. So I got both sides in mounted. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting the sway bar up here and get the brackets on the control arms here. All right, I got the sway bar up here, and I am my problem is I have an engineer who is inattentive. So when I design things, I think about the end user and the instructions on this thing, and I don't want to bag on Ride Tech. You know, this great product instructions are pretty good, but in the instructions it says to measure 8 1/4 inches from the bushing, the lower control arm bushing. Now, that can be multiple things. It could be from the edge of this, from the edge of the Delrin bushing, it could be from the center line of this. So I just kind of played around with it, and it turns out it's the edge of the casing here. So it was just nice if that was in the instructions, but other than that, it's in here, it's mocked up. I'm gonna go ahead and pull it back down and drill the holes in the lower control arm and be done with this so we can move on to the brakes, but just kind of wanted to show a little bit of the progress of where everything's at. Oh, it's got a shiny little sticker, I didn't even notice that. And that's kind of it right now. So I haven't been videoing any of this because it's pretty boring and it's kind of hard to do. One person trying to put this sway bar up here. There's a lot of I ended up using the exhaust stand in my head a couple times and the shoulders, and it was quite comical. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull this off, put those holes in real quick, and we can finish this up. All right, so the sway bar is on. It went on without a hitch, no problems. I got the brackets located here. Let's get up in there on both sides. They went in no problems. Everything torqued down, everything's good to go. Next thing up is just to drive the thing, see how it drives. So I'm hopefully getting a little closer today. So I've got start working on the brake lines. I think I'm gonna start in the back today. Start by making that little flared out line. It has to go from the trailing or from the frame rail over to the flexible line to the rear end. So I'm gonna start with that. So it's kind of where it's at. It's on. It's installed. It looks good. All right, so back here in the back, and what I've done here is I've bent a short little section. There's not much to it. It's a little bit long, and what I did was I bent this around a piece of 2.5-inch exhaust tubing to kind of get a nice smooth radius. And so no fancy tools, anything like that. So what I've got here is I've got to run make a line that goes from here to a fitting here. So my initial thought is what I did was I drew a line on here where approximately where the tubing will go inside the fitting here. So the flare will be approximately there where it mates up with this union. So my critical dimension in here is kind of centering it in this opening here. I've got a little bit of play in that this is a bend, so I can kind of bend it a little bit and play with it, but that's kind of where I'm at for there. So what I figured I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this approximately here, get it in here, make sure it's still the right length and everything, and then I'll come up and I'll mess with this one here. And this one's not as critical in that I can, the line will move this way and fore and aft here, so that'll give me a little bit of flexibility there. So it's not as critical. I'm going to try to get it on so that I can set this all the way back and tie this back in. I'll pop a hole through this hole right here so I can put a support, a cable or a line support there, so that it's not vibrating back here. But that's kind of where I'm going to go for right now. So I'm going to kind of mark this thing. I'm going to go back to the flaring tool and put a flare on it and see how close we can get. All right, I got that section set up here in the flaring tool. Basically what I did, I use a hacksaw, a real fine hacksaw, and cut that tubing to length. I actually cut it an 1/8 inch proud to take into account the flare. What I do then is I take this, my trusty Harbor Freight belt sander, which the actual belt sander portion of it's junk. That belt wanders no matter what you do. But I true up the end as best I can here, and then I use this flaring, or this inner and outer chamfering tool that I bought with Eastwood from this, with this flaring tool here, and just clean it up. So it ends up putting in a real nice finish on the end there. So and one thing I also did in my last video, I used just a grease as a lubricant, and I got to thinking about that. That grease is going to stay in those brake lines behind that flare a little bit. So I switched it up. I'm actually using a WD-40 type product right now. It's actually an AMSOIL, they call it a MPHD. It's a heavy duty metal protector, but just put a little bit of that on there for lubrication, and it makes a perfect flare every time. Okay, and here we are. Here's the finished product. I had to do a little bit of tweaking. I actually made it about an 1/8 inch too long, so what I had to do is just basically cut off right behind the flare and reflare it. So it actually fits perfect now. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it in and start working on these here. Okay, and here's the final product. So it's got a nice smooth bend out here. I gotta put a clip on here still, but everything lines up, plenty of clearance. I'm gonna put a tie back right here, somewhere in here. I'm not quite sure. The hole doesn't line up quite like I thought it was going to, but it worked out perfect. So now I'm going to work on shortening these rear lines on the rear axle here. All right, so I got this one cut off. What I did was I actually cut the end off so I could take the spring off of there, the protective sleeve, so I can get this. But I cut it to length here. I actually cut it on the other side. This has a return that goes back to the axle that would typically land here. So I cut it right before that, and that lines up perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and flare this end. Everything up here looks good. This one here, I don't know what's going on with this one. I don't know if this is a misbend or what, but this one, it doesn't even go anywhere near. So I'm going to kind of work with this one and see if I can't get it to snake up and around and then attach back here, because this is the stock attachment point for a 72. This is a 72 axle, 72 truck. This is actually flipped around backwards. Typically a 72 goes this way into this cross member, but I didn't do that. I ended up just going up and that way like the 70 and pre-70 trucks. So just kind of for ease, I didn't want to have to run a line up and over this notch and back out and around. And this is actually a cross member out of a 69, so it doesn't have the provisions for the brake line going through. So just kind of improvised and modified and went this way. Works out great. This line lines up. This one, I don't know what's going on there, so I'm going to rebend that one and see if we can't make that better. So that's what's going on right now. All right, so in an unfortunate turn of events, turns out I'm having a problem with this 3/16 stainless tubing. I did it 3 times now, and all 3 times when I do the second step to get the inverted flare, the material tears. It looks like it tears twice. You can feel it when you're flaring. It immediately, when you first start pulling, it immediately tears, and then it gets tough again. So I tried more deburring, less deburring. I tried warming it up with a torch a little bit before, and it just tore every time. So as much as I didn't want to do this, I am going to probably just go buy some nickel copper to go from the pumpkin down on each side, since these are not allowing me to cut them. So I'm not going to mess with this one. I'm going to leave this one as is, because I might be able to sell this to somebody. at least this side anyway. Kind of a bummer. I was hoping that I could keep it all stainless, but that's just kind of the way it goes sometimes. This smaller diameter tubing, I don't know if it's a little thinner wall or what, but it just wasn't working. I tried, you know, everything, all different types of greases, heat, you name it, and it just kept splitting. So that's the way it goes sometimes. Kind of a bummer because it kind of ends today, but we made decent progress. Got some lines made there. Got that front sway bar on. So I did double check those lines in there, and they did not tear. So I don't know. It just must be something to do with the smaller 3/16 tubing. I might call Inline Tube in the morning to see what they have to say about it. Maybe there's something that I'm not doing correctly, but kind of a bummer, like I say, but that's how it goes sometimes when you're building cars like this. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and call it a day. I'm going to clean up around here and go home. So I do appreciate everybody watching. Like always, if you have any questions, concerns, see anything I'm doing wrong, have any suggestions, or really have any idea on these brake lines, I'd be grateful to hear it, because I don't know what's going on here. I'm just scratching my head. So please like and subscribe if you'd like to. I'm hoping to have some more videos here and get this thing wrapped up. So I'll run to the store and grab some nickel copper. I think about buying just some of those prefab sections, and then I'll kind of cut them to length so I don't have to flare one end. So that's kind of where it's at today. It's where I'm going to stop, and appreciate everybody watching.